airborne, then that means that the virus, when a person who is positive, no, would be spreading the virus through the air whenever he speaks or talks, or whenever he coughs or sneezes. That also means that the virus can be present in the air and can travel for around 2 meters. Have shown that the virus can stay in the air for as long as 8 hours.
You just heard Dr. Maricar Limpin of the Philippine College of Physicians explaining what airborne means. That's after the Lancet published a study saying SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, could be airborne. The new finding warrants stricter safety protocols. Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. Let's start with a new study which suggests that SARS-CoV-2 may already be airborne, although the World Health Organization says more evidence is needed to make a definitive conclusion. Greg Gregorio with The Big Story.
Jules and his family are in their respective quarantines battling COVID-19. Jules and his sister have mild symptoms, while their parents are considered moderate cases due to their comorbidities. Jules believes one of them contracted the virus during a grocery run, despite being extremely cautious.
Ever since last year, naging maingat naman talaga with health protocols. Nakakapraning kung saan pa pwedeng makuha yun.
Previously, SARS-CoV-2, the virus causing COVID-19, is believed to spread predominantly through respiratory droplets. But a new study published in the Lancet journal found increasing evidence that the virus is airborne. The research presented 10 evidence, including long-range transmission between people in adjacent rooms, SARS-CoV-2 in air filters and building ducts in hospitals with COVID patients, and transmission even among people who are not sneezing or coughing. In an interview with One News, the Philippine College of Physicians Vice President Maricar Limpin said viruses can stay in the air for 8 hours and can travel up to 2 meters.
Making sure that there is an adequate air circulation. If we need to stay or meet with somebody, then better if we do it outdoors.
The health department is awaiting recommendations from foreign experts.
So we have our existing protocols already. Aantayin po natin ang rekomendasyon pa rin ng WHO.
For the World Health Organization, more studies are needed to conclusively say that SARS-CoV-2 is airborne.
Unless we have a clear impact analysis of what degree of transmission can be attributed to aerosol, to airborne transmission, our primary focus should be on prevention of transmission through the wearing of the masks and hand hygiene.
Limpin urges the same, wearing face masks and shield, physical distancing of at least 2 meters, enough circulation indoors, and minimizing contact to only 15 to 30 minutes. For News 5, Greg Gregorio, we are One News.
How does this new finding change the way we battle COVID-19? To shed more light on the matter, we have with us infectious disease specialist Dr. Ron Solante joining us via StreamYard. Dr. Solante, I mean, this is not a new suspicion. I mean, it seems like this issue of whether or not it's airborne or not keeps cropping up. Have we moved? I mean, do we have a better understanding right now of the behavior of this virus?
Yeah, Robin, no, because ever since the pandemic started, we in the healthcare facilities already prepared that this virus can also be possibly transmitted through airborne. And that's why our current guideline in infection control also factors in that it is both airborne and droplet. It's just the issue here is that when you are in the hospital, when you are with a patient with COVID-19, there's no problem because we have that guidelines already. The only issue here now is that how will you apply that in public? And I totally agree with the previous comments that we have to strictly implement, number one, the wearing of the face mask and the face shield. What is important in airborne is that this is so common in poorly ventilated, enclosed area. So we need to re, re-engineer most of the rooms now, that the air will not be dense in that particular room, so that there will be free air coming from outside inside. And I think the most crucial part here is really providing adequate ventilation in the room.
Okay, so dinawin ko lang po yun. You said it was already factored in when it comes to our hospitals and facilities and so on. So hindi kailangan ng retrofitting doon. But it has real implications, for example, in our offices and in closed spaces, including our homes?
Yeah, doon talaga tayo reposition sa ano natin, no, sa mga preventive measures, particularly sa mga bahay na walang masyadong ventilation. So siguro para ma-lessen ang airborne transmission, kung meron tayong suspect na positive, na symptomatic, then you have to wear your face mask and face shield. And pinaka-importante dito yung physical distance, because 3 feet may not be enough because of the long trajectory sa airborne, kasi mas maliit yung particles, so mas mahaba yung itra-travel nila. So chances are we need to increase it to 2 to 3 meters the most.
Okay, maraming salamat po, Doc. That was infectious disease expert Dr. Ronjin Solante. And these are the other big stories tonight. 7 areas in the country have been placed under signal number 2 as Bising has maintained its strength. More than 18,000 families have been evacuated. After a community pantry in Maguinhawa, Quezon City went viral last week, similar efforts have sprouted in several parts of the country, but some are putting political color to the initiative. And after competing in Uzbekistan, weightlifter Hidilyn Diaz officially punched a ticket to the Tokyo Olympics. These big stories after the break. Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. You're still watching The Big Story. Typhoon Bising continues to affect the eastern portion of the country as residents have been evacuated for their safety. But what exactly has happened in these areas? Camille Sabonte with this report.
Huge waves battered the seawall at the Catbalogan port in Samar. Despite the heavy rains and strong winds, some vendors near the port remained open. Work and classes have been suspended in the province. Samar is among provinces where the wrath of Typhoon Bising felt. The country's second typhoon is traversing the country's eastern portion, including Catanduanes. In Gigmoto town, fishermen opted not to sail and secured their boats instead. In Tacloban, strong winds coupled with slippery road overturned a tricycle at the San Juanico Bridge. Still in Leyte, at St. Bernard, one male resident died after he was hit by a coconut tree at the height of Typhoon Bising. He was rushed to the Anawan District Hospital but was declared dead on arrival. Some parts of southern Leyte and the whole island of Samar are still experiencing power interruptions. The NDRMC said over 18,000 families have been preemptively evacuated in Region 5 and 8 alone. In an interview in One News Agenda, spokesperson Mark Timbal said health protocols will be strictly implemented in evacuation areas.
Evacuation centers to ensure that there will be physical distancing for evacuees, as well as in the process of the evacuees should be wearing their masks. Physical distancing should be observed. The same goes for with the evacuating personnel, so that we can make sure na hindi tayo magkakawahan habang nagkakaroon ng evacuation.
The National Disaster Risk Reduction Management Council has on standby 1.6 billion peso worth of food and funds. The Social Welfare Department has earmarked 556,000 as standby funds. The palace has assured the public that government agencies and LGUs are on top of the situation. Malacanang also urges continuous adherence to health protocols. For News 5, Camille Samonte, we are One News.
Typhoon Bising has maintained its strength as it moves north-northwestward as of this afternoon. According to Pag-asa, Bising has sustained winds of 195 kilometers per hour and gusts of up to 240 kilometers per hour. Signal number 2 is currently hoisted over 7 areas in the country. These are Catanduanes, the eastern portion of Camarines Sur and Albay, eastern and central portions of Sorsogon, northern Samar, and the northern portions of both Samar and eastern Samar. Signal number 1, meanwhile, is raised over the eastern portion of Cagayan, the provinces of Isabela and Quirino, the northern and central portions of Aurora, the eastern portion of Quezon, including the Polillo Islands, Camarines Norte, the rest of Albay, Sorsogon, and Masbate. In Visayas, the rest of Samar and eastern Samar, Biliran, Leyte, and the northern portion of Cebu are also under signal number 1. Pag-asa expects Bising to weaken in the coming days. It is forecast to move northward or north-northwestward until Wednesday evening or Thursday early morning at the latest, after which it is expected to move away from the Luzon landmass. It turns out pork prices are likely to remain expensive with or without the executive order on lowering tariff on pork imports. Let's find out why in this report by mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez, who's giving us a front seat to that story.
Local vendors of pork are in a dilemma. Faced with the prospect of a flood of cheaper imports, some are considering getting out of the resale business altogether.
Hindi kaya ng mamimili at hindi na rin namin kaya magpalugi ng wala na, ubos na eh. Wala na ipapalugi.
But Toto is also considering switching to imported meat.
Marami sa amin, mga nagpagawa na kami ng chiller para sa frozen meat.
Aling Vicky says she's sticking to fresh local pork even if it comes as far as Visayas and Mindanao.
Gusto nila kahit mataas, basta ang baboy namin, yung tawid dagat.
Even though the Philippines sources most of its imported pork from as far as the US, Brazil, and Canada, imported meat still ends up much cheaper than the ones brought over from Visayas and Mindanao. The difference could be as much as 200 pesos a kilo. According to the Meat Importers and Traders Association, they can offer wholesalers imported pork for as low as 150 pesos a kilo.
150 pesos per kilo na live. Sa 200 pesos per kilo na yung kung carcass, kaya po ng tindera na i-retail at 300 pesos niya.
To tame prices, the DA has imposed suggested retail prices for imported pork beginning April 9. But look at the difference. That's still significantly lower than the prevailing price of local pork in wet markets, of between 370 to 380 a kilo, according to the DA's latest price monitoring report. And in reality, prices of local meat at some supermarkets have even shot up to 450 pesos a kilo.
Nagmahal ng price? Ano yung mga pork dito ngayon, kuya? Ano po to? Local or imported? Local or lahat po to?
Ang imported lang natin ng tuwalya ng baka.
Okay.
In short, local pork can compete on price. Economists say that's not just because of African swine fever. It's because the local hog industry remains inefficient and outdated. At least 20 senators have now passed a resolution calling on President Duterte to revoke Executive Order 128, which not only lowers tariffs on imported pork, but also increases the allowed import volumes. But the government insists this is a temporary measure and won't kill the local hog industry.
Yung gap ay pupunuan yung augmentation galing ibang bansa. Para sa ganon, mayroon pa rin karne ng baboy.
One thing everyone agrees on is that it will take some time before local hog farmers are able to repopulate their farms, which means in the short term, with or without the EO, fresh local pork will remain a pricey commodity. I'm Pamela Vasquez and we are One News.
Now an express look at some of the day's big stories. Hong Kong has banned flights from India, Pakistan, and the Philippines for 2 weeks starting April 20. That is after it detected two N501Y variant cases for the first time. The neighboring Macau, meanwhile, will impose a 28-day quarantine on people from the three countries. The Science and Technology Department is already in talks with 6 local firms to manufacture their own COVID-19 vaccines. On the Chiefs Presents Usapang Bakuna, DOST Undersecretary Rowena Guevara said it's their tangible solution to the scarce vaccine supply. Guevara said the government cannot just rely on importing vaccines, especially if other ASEAN countries are capable of producing their own. The Philippine National Police Maritime Group will deploy assets to the West Philippine Sea. Maritime Director John Hamili said they will also deploy special operating units to Pag-asa, Palawan, and other regions near the contested waters. They have also asked the national government for larger ships. We'll take another break. When we return, several community pantries sprouted up across the country, but some critics say the initiative is a front for the communist movement. And Olympic silver medalist Hidilyn Diaz is off to Tokyo for another chance to get the gold. The details after the break. Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. Still watching The Big Story. More groups are now organizing community pantries in their areas to help those in need. Many say this collective effort fills the gaps in government's pandemic response. But there are actually some Filipinos who are criticizing the organizers, calling them communists. Marian Enriquez with the details.
Even at past 5 in the afternoon, people still lined up at this community pantry by Tulong Obrero. Organized by Kilusang Mayo Uno, Piston, and other labor groups, the stall hands out a kilo of rice, canned goods, and noodles. This is just one of several community pantries which have sprouted in the country ever since a humble effort started in Maginhawa, Quezon City last week. But in this pantry, beneficiaries are given handouts and are asked if they are willing to sign a petition for a 10,000 peso ayuda. Because of this, some netizens red tag the groups involved in the initiative.
Masakit po sa amin yung paratang na yon dahil ang layunin naman po talaga namin ay para makatulong, lalong-lalo na po doon sa mga manggagawang nawalan ng trabaho at yung mga driver na nawalan ng pasada.
They denounce claims that they are only using this opportunity to recruit members and influence beneficiaries. Another progressive group, Anak Pawis, has a community pantry along CP Garcia Avenue in Quezon City in collaboration with Pamalakaya. They also donated hot meals to the Maginhawa Community Pantry. Anak Pawis President Ariel Casilao also decried the red tagging.
Kumalat ito dahil nakita yung effectivity na wala tayong maaasahan sa gobyernong ito. Hindi sapat ang isang libong ayudang.
Bayan Muna Representative Ferdinand Gaite lamented how other Filipinos can doubt the motives of those only helping out. For Gaite, the movement exposes the government's incompetence.
Ito na nga yung solusyon, yung community pantry, which this government or their allies are vilifying as, again, quote-unquote, communist infiltrated activity.
However, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque claimed the rise of community pantries is not a condemnation of the government's pandemic response.
It's part of our psyche to help one another. It simply shows the best in us during the worst of times.
But Roque also acknowledged the slow pace of aid distribution.
Sa panahon po kasi ng pandemya, hindi natin maiiwasan na talagang mag-ingat dahil baka mamaya mabigay nga yung ayuda, magkaroon naman ng COVID yung mga taong bayan.
For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
Let's take a look at the biggest stories on print and online. From the Philippine Star, more than 191,000 Filipinos have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19. That's more than a month since the country started its inoculation campaign. DOH Undersecretary Mirna Cabohate says the country has administered more than 1.4 million doses in more than 3,100 sites. To date, more than 3 million COVID-19 jabs have been delivered in the Philippines. Business World is reporting the Philippines is expecting about $4 billion in capital investments from 3 major mining projects. This after President Duterte lifted last week the 9-year moratorium on new mineral agreements. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said new mining projects are also expected to generate 40 billion pesos in local taxes and 20 billion pesos worth of social development projects. And this from News 5. Malacanang says President Duterte is confident that the military will not turn against him amid the West Philippine Sea dispute. Reports surfaced of an alleged group of officers from the AFP and the DND supposedly called the Viber 500, demanding the president to assert the country's sovereignty. Both the DND and AFP have since denied these claims. They say these were intended to confuse the people to turn against government. In world news, Britain's Prince Philip was laid to rest on Saturday in a scaled-down ceremony that celebrated his 7 decades of service. Queen Elizabeth stood alone at St. George Chapel while her late husband was being lowered into the royal vault. The Queen sat alone and was separated from other members of the royal family due to COVID-19 restrictions. The service and the funeral march was attended by senior royals, including Philip's son and heir to the throne, Prince Charles, and his sons, Princes William and Harry. Philip's naval cap and sword lay on top of the coffin, which was covered with the Duke of Edinburgh's personal standard featuring the Danish coat of arms, the Greek cross, Edinburgh Castle, and the stripes of the Mountbatten family. For the big story in sports, Hidilyn Diaz has formally clinched a spot at the Tokyo Olympics after finishing 4th in the Asian Weightlifting Championships in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. Diaz finished 4th in the women's 55-kilogram event after lifting 94 kilograms in the snatch, 118 kilograms in the clean and jerk for a 212-kilogram total. China's Qiyin Liao and Yejun Lee finished 1st and 2nd respectively, while Muatar Nabieva of Uzbekistan settled for bronze. Diaz is now eyeing the elusive gold in the Tokyo Olympics after finishing with a silver medal in the previous Summer Games. And here is another Sana All moment. Israel has dropped its face mask requirement outdoors as it has inoculated at least 80% of its 9.3 million population. Hospitalizations and contagions have already dropped sharply as most Israelis over 16 got their second dose of Pfizer vaccine. The country even reopened physical classes in primary and secondary schools, but Israel does not want to be too complacent. Wearing masks indoors remains a must. It still limits entry of foreigners and non-vaccinated citizens. And that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250. Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. And happy birthday, Gretchen Ho. I'm Robbie Alampay. We are One News. Good evening.